discuss the 1911 being a combat pistol. So, the 1911 as a combat pistol, it's been proven throughout history to actually be pretty good, depending on, a few things. And we got to kind of look at the reality of these variables that decide whether it's a good pistol or not. This is a Rock Island Rock Standard. It's a pretty plain Jane. It's not exactly a 1911 A1. Their 1911s aren't exactly GI spec or whatever. For the most part it is, but if you really want a GI style that's really close in metallurgy and construction and everything but property of U.S. government on it, then I would go with the Auto Ordnance GI model. With all that said, first thing I want to do is I want to look at the characteristics of a gunfighter, or at least some things that you'll see, because there's a lot of people that, basically talk about the 1911 as though it's not even a viable option. It's not even close, right? So, there's some things. Civilian, police, and military. There's some things that each one of them have to deal with where pistols are going to have certain types of capabilities, more or less. So, in all of these situations, you pretty much want the best caliber that you can get to give the most terminal effect, the best terminal effect on target as you can get it to give you, right? So, for civilians, you're going to be up close, and you're going to be kind of limited on your ability to respond. You're going to be you're not going to just be able to unload and assault somebody really in the civilian world. You're going to be doing close-in engagements, and you're going to see limited usage of the firearm in the first place, and you're not really going to be shooting that many rounds. So, yeah, you do want a spare magazine just in case, but for the most part, you're not going to really be shooting that many rounds unless you like to machine gun all your ammo, and then you will need a reload. But most of the time, people shooting extra rounds is unnecessary, or they're indiscriminately shot, and not discriminating your fire and not having positive identification. You need to make sure every round counts. So realistically, you don't need too many rounds in order to defend yourself, except for that wet dream of multiple attackers or whatever that some people seem to have. The next thing is police. Pardon all my throat clearing. Just had some fruit, so the sugar's kind of thickening up my saliva. But anyways, police. Police, their first weapon, their best weapon on their duty belt is going to be their pistol, right? So they're going to be engaging at all distances, and they're going to be using it for defense and attack. If they got to rush in there, they might not have time to grab a shotgun or a rifle if they have to rush in to respond. So they might be going up against someone with a rifle using their pistol. Now, not every officer is proficient, just like not everybody in the civilian or military world is proficient, but their stuff is a little bit different, and I would say that police, if you're thinking that anybody's going to need a gun that's actually going to be versatile, it would be police. And even if we look at that, most of the time when they're shooting a ridiculous amount of rounds, they're not really hitting their target a lot of times, or even if they are, they're on drugs or whatever, but they're not really aiming for areas that would actually stop the fight or limit advancement or mobility, like maybe a headshot or a pelvic shot or whatever. For the most part, the capacity that they would need is somewhere around the 1911, right? So they got an obligation to basically, some jurisdictions have the obligation to answer the call, but most of them are meat eaters, and they want to go in there and take care of the threat and take care of people. Military. Most of the time, if you're going to be using a pistol, it's going to be close in, and it's going to be for defense, or at least the theory is, but you get one magazine extra typically, and then you get some special forces that their stuff is still used in defense, and but it's a rare occasion for it to be used, and you just get one spare magazine with it. and that's all you can really expect. But the military is not really a good source of information on how pistols are used. I would give more credit to the police, but there's some variables on that too. Their training and their ability to maintain their weapons, the knowledge that they have, how used they are, or whatever. You may get one officer that doesn't practice very much or practices too much and just lays hate with a pistol and all that other stuff. Like, you want a lot of capacity for suppressing or whatever, and I'll get to that in a second. But there's this big fixation on capacity, and with the 1911 you are sacrificing capacity unless you go with the double stack option, where you can actually, in the 45, you can get like 14 rounds in this from this company, Rock Island Armory. So it may not actually be a sacrifice, but some people just want so many rounds in their pistol. And one of the things I heard was Small Arms Solutions were talking, about the 1911, how it doesn't have the capacity to help, and it's a big downfall because you need to suppress your target. Well, as I've been saying for a long time, the best suppression is the shot to the dome and actually hitting your target. That's the best way to suppress your target. And that means that you need to be, being accountable for your shots, not just spraying in an area like the Army does. But, that basically, an example of that is the Marine Corps changing their squad setup because the IAR. The IAR is a new concept where they're looking more at accuracy rather than just volume to fire in an area like it used to be, thinking that suppression is basically just shooting rounds in the general direction. That doesn't work. Haji firing over a wall doesn't work. You got to actually either hit your target or be so close to hitting your target that they shit themselves. So that's actually suppression, and that means that you're aiming and trying to hit them. So, with all that said, I don't think the capacity on this pistol is all that bad. I'm not going to be suppressing with a pistol, especially if, no matter what, if it's an offensive weapon or a defensive weapon, even if I have something like this Beretta M9A3, I'm not going to sit there and suppress with this pistol, even though it may have 17+1. Those rounds are going to count, especially in 9mm. You're going to have to make it count because it, it still isn't going to hold up to the terminal effects and ability to stay on course after hitting bone like the 45 will. So the next thing is, the ability to hit your target and hit it competently and quickly rules over any other argument realistically. The thing about the 1911, the grip, the single stack grip, it's beautiful. It's ergonomic, it's very easy, it's a natural pointer, and the trigger. The trigger is, it's nearly impossible to replicate with any other pistol and modifications without making your gun unsafe, like your striker fired guns or whatever. The 1911 in the Series 70, it wasn't really drop safe. Unless you were to put a really light firing pin, but even then it's only limiting how drop safe it was. The Series 80, pretty drop safe, it's pretty good to go. But that was one of the downfalls, and some people say that the triggers are a little different on the Series 80. I have never seen that to be the case. I don't see any difference in the poundage or the characteristics of the trigger. So anyways, with all that said, these guns are easy to shoot. I've seen a lot of female shooters pick them up and just fall in love with them. They love them more than their husbands or boyfriends sometimes. But the next thing I want to talk about is maintenance. This is one of the big hits on this pistol. It's the durability and reliability of it. A lot of times people are talking about how shitty they are or how much they malfunction or whatever. There's a lot of companies out there that are making 1911s, and this is a pistol that's just like any other. When you're loading it in 45 caliber in any gun can have problems. I had problems with my Glock 21. I had problems with the USP 45. I had problems with the the M&P 45. I've had problems with almost every 45, especially like the Glock 36. That thing was absolutely horrid. and the Glock 30. But with all that said, the 1911 actually has given me the least amount of those problems. So I can't really say that I'm too upset with the reliability or the durability of it. Not saying these things are perfect, but if you know what you're doing, you know how to quote-unquote break them in. Some people don't think break-in periods are necessary, but I don't call it a break-in period. I call it an amnesty period to show the BS that it could give me, because they test fire with 5 or 10 rounds at the factory, and that's pretty much it. They just put them together, and yeah, they should work. But there's going to be metal on metal friction from actually shooting the gun, not just from producing it. That's why you get wear on pistols. If it was to come with wear from the factory, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would be pissed about that. But anyways, with all that said, some maintenance considerations to keep your 1911 in top-notch shape. I would say that the 18-pound recoil spring is the best way to extend longevity and reliability for shooting 230 grain or 200 grain ball. 185 plus P, though the 185 plus P, lighter and faster, isn't really going to help you terminally, unless you're shooting it out of a shorter barrel, like maybe the 4-inch version of this 1911, like a Commander or something like that. Then I would say 185 plus P. Then the next thing is, as far as the recoil spring is concerned, I would say you're going to get about 5,000 to 10,000 rounds. With the general 15-pound spring, you're going to look at 2,500 rounds before you want to change it, because it doesn't mean that you're going to start getting malfunctions. What it actually is the frame. The frames are typically cast on 1911s. You see some that have light aluminum frames or whatever, but generally they're cast, and the same with the slides as well. They don't need to be extra hard and everything. They can have some give, and so standard cast 4140 is typically the way they like to go with 1911s. So that's a pretty good metal, but you are going to get some frame bashing. It's very rare that the 1911 is actually going to get a lot of frame cracks, but it does happen. The Colt, what was it? Recon was getting, Marine Recon was getting their CQB or whatever that was. That pistol was absolutely horrid. It had a lot of failures. They would have cracks around this area. It had some problems. I know of at least one person that was issued that pistol and had no problems with it, and he loved it. But there were plenty of reports of it having problems. So I don't know. I like to run my guns hard, so understanding the maintenance considerations for it is a pretty big deal. So anyways, that's the recoil spring. You gotta change it out a good amount to prevent malfunction, but more importantly to prevent bashing, especially if you're a high round count shooter. So anyways, most people will never have to replace the recoil spring on a 1911 because they just don't shoot it all that damn much. So the next thing is, you're going to be looking at about 25 to 30,000 rounds probably for the hammer spring, and yes, that's pushing it, but that's also probably going to go for the bushing as well, depending on how much you're shooting. The bushing here in the front, if you don't have any bushing, if you have a bull barrel or something, then you're probably going to be good to go for, until the barrel wears out, which would probably be around 50,000 rounds. But the next thing I would actually be changing out would be the firing pin itself. Because the firing pins, I would say that's one of the weaknesses, I guess you could say. It's something that actually does need to be replaced, that can snap on you, especially with a lot of dry fire. It's possible that it could crack and fail. The firing pin spring itself, I would say about 15,000 rounds as well, with the leaf spring for the sear and everything else. So just keep those little things in mind. Again, you're looking at about 50,000 rounds for the barrel, if not a little bit less or more, depending on what you're shooting. But the next thing is, yes, you have those maintenance considerations and stuff, and you got to kind of see how it goes and really run your gun. That's the best way to actually test it and actually smooth out a lot of the surfaces, is to actually run it, not one round every 2 seconds. You gotta actually like machine gun it and actually run it, try to pour rounds into your target accurately. But the next thing is recoil. Recoil in the 1911 is more feelings than it is reality. This weapon alone, it handles the 45 and turns it into, a very light recoiling round. The only other pistol that I know that actually shoots this, shoots the 45 with and has less recoil, would actually be the M&P 45 full size, and we're talking about the 4.5-inch barrel version. But most of the time, it's feelings over reality. It doesn't really. Most people are talking about like the felt recoil or the muzzle flip. I don't give a shit if this thing does the 360-degree rotation in my hand, as long as it goes right back on target. That's what the 1911 gives you. So if you're holding it properly, it's going to be natural pointing, and it's going to be easy to control. Next thing is the weight. Here's the thing. As I said, the ability to hit your target rules every other argument. Weight. I think it is worth it if you carry it right and you're proficient in it. If you carry it in the right holster, I'm a small dude and I carried 1911 for years, and I feel very comfortable carrying a 1911. I don't feel outgunned or anything like that. I mean, 8+1 or whatever. I mean, you can get a flush fitting 8+1 and you can carry a full-size 1911 just as easy as a smaller pistol. And I don't feel undergunned carrying that. It's a complete crap. But I don't see the weight as being an issue, except for people that just want something to complain about. They want it to be the lightest gun possible and this and that. But there's always going to be sacrifices. I don't really care about the weight. I mean, weight actually helps with recoil. Weight helps with stability and aiming for the most part, depending on how the weight is. But it's easy to be proficient with the 1911. It's a great platform to learn on. And even though it has, 8+1 or whatever, typically when you're down to the pistol, you need to be proficient with it. And that means you need to be accountable for every shot and be making those hits. I don't remember too many people that were thinking that it was way too little ammo. Maybe just the numbers are what people are after, but it really doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that 9 rounds is, too little when you have a good round that is, proven even in full metal jacket to do a good amount of damage and be pretty damn good at bashing through bones and barriers and stuff like that. I don't really see it as a problem having 8+1, but to each their own. Go ahead and leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. A lot of people are probably going to say, nope, 1911 is crap. Just get a Glock. Well, okay, whatever. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Doesn't mean they're right. But anyways, doesn't mean I'm right. So leave your comments below, and thanks a lot for watching, and you guys have a good one.